The leather check presenter landed softly in front of me. $3,180, ma'am, the waiter said politely. For a second, the entire private dining room went silent. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died instantly. Nearly 30 pairs of eyes turned toward the small table beside the service hallway where I'd been told to sit. At the center of the room, my uncle smiled as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "So," Rick said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "are you going to take care of your family's dinner?" My family's dinner. The same family that, less than an hour earlier, had told me I wasn't family enough to sit with them. I looked down at the bill, then slowly lifted my teacup and took a calm sip. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. Then I placed the cup back on its saucer, closed the leather folder without looking inside again, and gently slid it back toward the waiter. "I'm sorry," I said. The waiter looked confused. Before he could speak again, I raised my eyes to my uncle. "But before anyone pays this check," I said quietly, "there's something everyone at this table deserves to know." Rick's smile didn't disappear. If anything, it grew wider. He thought he'd already won. He had no idea the evening he'd carefully arranged was about to become something completely different. I had arrived only 15 minutes late. Not because I didn't care about my aunt and uncle's 40th wedding anniversary, but because a compliance review at work had run longer than expected. I'd even stopped on the way to pick up the crystal serving platter my aunt had admired months earlier. I walked into one of the city's finest restaurants, carrying the carefully wrapped gift with a genuine smile. The private dining room sparkled with polished silverware, white tablecloths, fresh flowers, and soft piano music drifting through hidden speakers. Nearly everyone in the Bennett family was already there. My cousins were laughing together. My aunt was greeting guests. Several empty chairs surrounded the main banquet table. I had barely taken 2 steps toward one of them when Uncle Rick's voice echoed across the room. "Olivia." Every conversation stopped. I turned toward him. "Those seats are for family." I actually looked around, thinking perhaps another group was expected. "I'm sorry." Rick pointed toward the back corner of the room. "Your seat is over there." I followed his finger. A tiny 2-person table had been placed beside the swinging kitchen doors where waiters carried dirty dishes in and out. Just beyond it sat the restaurant's service station, complete with garbage bins hidden behind decorative panels that couldn't quite hide the smell whenever the doors swung open. For several seconds, nobody spoke. A few cousins suddenly became fascinated with their phones. Others stared into their wine glasses. No one said, "That's ridiculous." No one offered me their chair. Even my aunt lowered her eyes without saying a word. I forced a small smile. "If that's where you'd like me to sit." Rick nodded once. "It is." I carried my purse and gift across the room, while every step seemed louder than the last. One waiter hurried to pull out the chair for me, looking almost embarrassed on my behalf. "I'm very sorry about the location, ma'am," he whispered. "It's okay," I answered, even though we both knew it wasn't. Dinner began. From my little table, I watched everyone else enjoying champagne toasts, shared appetizers, and family stories, while servers constantly brushed past my shoulder carrying trays of empty plates. Every few minutes, the kitchen doors burst open behind me. Dirty dishes, used napkins, garbage bags headed toward the service hallway. Each time, I caught Uncle Rick glancing in my direction. Not accidentally. Intentionally. He wasn't checking whether I was comfortable. He was checking whether everyone had noticed where he'd put me. The humiliation wasn't a side effect. It was the point. I told myself to get through dinner. Smile politely. Give my aunt her gift. Go home. Then dessert arrived. The head waiter approached my table, carrying a black leather check presenter. He stopped beside me instead of Uncle Rick. "Excuse me, ma'am." He carefully placed it in front of me. $3,180. The room became so quiet, I could hear the kitchen doors swinging shut behind me. And then Rick leaned back in his chair, folded his hands together, and asked the question he'd clearly been waiting all evening to ask. "So, are you finally going to do something for this family?" I looked from the check, to the waiter, to every face staring back at me. Then I took one slow sip of tea, closed the folder, and slid it back across the table. "I think," I said softly, "everyone here deserves to hear something before this bill gets paid." The waiter froze. So did everyone else. The waiter looked uncertain, his hands still resting lightly on the edge of the leather check presenter. "Would you like me to come back in a few minutes, ma'am?" he asked quietly. I looked up at him and gave him a polite smile. "If you don't mind." "Of course." He nodded once, picked up nothing, and simply stepped a few feet away, remaining close enough to return if needed. His hesitation made the silence in the room even heavier. No one reached for another bite of dessert. No one resumed their conversations. Everyone was waiting to see whether I would argue, cry, or embarrass myself. Rick chuckled into his wineglass. "There it is," he said. "I knew she'd have an excuse." A few nervous laughs followed. Not many. Just enough to remind me how easily people laughed when someone else was the target. I rested both hands around my teacup. "I'll explain," I said calmly. "I just need a minute." Rick leaned back comfortably. "Take all the time you need." His confidence wasn't natural. It felt rehearsed, as though he already knew exactly how the rest of the evening was supposed to unfold. 3 weeks earlier, my phone had rung during lunch. The caller ID displayed the name of a law office I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. "Ms. Bennett," an older gentleman asked. "Yes." "My name is Daniel Harper. I was your grandmother Alina's attorney for nearly 20 years. I straightened in my chair. "My grandmother. I'd appreciate the opportunity to meet with you privately." Is something wrong?" "There are several matters involving her estate that require your attention." His voice was careful. Professional. Not alarming. Just unusually deliberate. "When would you be available?" I agreed to meet him the following afternoon. When I left his office the next day, I carried a sealed envelope that he instructed me not to discuss until the appropriate time. "For now," he'd said, "please keep this confidential." I promised I would. And I kept that promise. Keeping quiet wasn't difficult. I'd been doing it most of my life. After my father died when I was 16, family gatherings slowly changed. No one announced it. No one declared that I no longer belonged. It simply happened. I wasn't the first person invited anymore. I wasn't included in planning birthdays or holidays. Family photographs somehow started without me. If I arrived early, I was asked to help set up tables. If I arrived late, someone joked that I'd finally decided to show up. I learned to smile through it. What made it harder was that the same relatives who overlooked me were always comfortable asking for help. My cousin Melissa once called in tears because she couldn't understand a stack of insurance paperwork after her husband lost his job. I spent an entire Saturday helping her file everything correctly. She thanked me with a hug. At Christmas, she forgot to include me in the family gift exchange. Another cousin needed help reviewing a mortgage contract before signing. I stayed up until midnight reading every page. He saved thousands because of a clause that shouldn't have been there. He told everyone how relieved he was. He never mentioned who'd found the problem. When my aunt struggled to organize my grandmother's medical bills, I quietly built spreadsheets that sorted every payment and insurance reimbursement. No one applauded. I wasn't looking for applause. I only wanted to feel like I belonged. My aunt occasionally noticed. Once, after a family barbecue, she walked me to my car. "I'm sorry about Rick," she whispered. I smiled. "You don't have to apologize for him." "I know." She looked back toward the house before lowering her voice. "I just wish things were different." "So do I." She squeezed my hand. But when the next gathering came around, nothing changed. Rick still decided where everyone sat. Rick still spoke for the family. And everyone still let him. Back in the restaurant, I watched him from across the room. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He kept checking his phone beneath the table. Every few minutes. Read something. Locked the screen. Smiled. Checked it again. It wasn't the behavior of a man improvising. He was waiting. Waiting for a specific moment. Waiting for someone. Or waiting for confirmation that his plan was working. As I watched him, my younger cousin Ethan quietly drifted toward my table under the pretense of refilling his water. Without looking directly at me, he murmured under his breath, "Olivia." I glanced up. "What is it?" His eyes flicked toward Rick. I heard him talking to the restaurant manager before everyone arrived. My heartbeat slowed. "What did he say?" Ethan swallowed. "He told them that when dinner was over," he hesitated, "the check had to be brought to you first." He immediately walked away before anyone noticed we'd spoken. I looked back at Uncle Rick. He was already watching me, smiling, as though he couldn't wait for me to lose my temper. The waiter returned to my table. "Have you made a decision, ma'am?" Before I could answer, Rick folded his arms across his chest and raised his voice for everyone to hear. "Either pay it." He paused just long enough for every eye in the room to settle on me. "Or show everyone exactly who you really are." Chapter 1 complete. Hit Geo to continue. Chapter 2. Rick's words hung over the room like a verdict that had already been decided. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the whispers started. "I mean, Olivia does have a good job. I heard she's doing really well. $3,000 probably isn't much for her." Someone farther down the table added, "She's always been so private. Maybe this is her way of giving back." I recognized every voice. People I'd helped. People whose late-night phone calls I'd answered. People who had happily accepted my time, my advice, and sometimes my money. Yet not one of them asked the obvious question. Why should the guest who had been forced to sit beside the service station be expected to pay for everyone else's celebration? I folded my hands on the table instead of reacting. The louder they became, the calmer I forced myself to remain. Because losing my temper would only complete the picture Rick had carefully painted. The waiter cleared his throat politely. "Ma'am, would you like me to process the payment?" I looked at him with a reassuring smile. "May I ask you one question first?" "Of course." "Who instructed you to place this bill in front of me?" His expression immediately tightened. He glanced toward the restaurant manager, then back toward me. "I'm not sure I'm supposed to discuss internal arrangements." "I understand." I nodded. "I'm not asking you to take sides." The room grew quiet again. "I only want to know who gave you the instruction." Before the waiter could answer, Rick laughed loudly. "Oh, for heaven's sake." He pushed back his chair, just enough for everyone to see him. "I did." He spread his hands, as though admitting something perfectly reasonable. "I told them to bring the bill to you." Several relatives chuckled approvingly. Rick looked around the room. Someone had too. He lifted his wineglass. "You've done well for yourself, Olivia." His tone sounded almost complimentary. "Better than most of us." He smiled. "So I figured, why not contribute for once?" A few people nodded. Someone even clinked a glass in agreement. I stared at him for several seconds. Contribute. The word almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was so completely detached from reality. I looked slowly around the room. Contribute. Rick shrugged. That's what I said. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting. No anger. No raised voice. Just one word. Several relatives exchanged uncertain glances. They had expected an argument. Instead, they were getting questions. My eyes settled on my cousin Melissa. Melissa. She looked surprised. Yes. Do you remember calling me 2 years ago after Brian lost his job? Her face changed slightly. You asked me to help organize your insurance paperwork. She nodded. Yes. And when your emergency savings ran out. I stopped there. Melissa lowered her eyes. She remembered. I turned toward my cousin David. David, do you remember asking me to review your mortgage documents before you signed? He cleared his throat. Yes. You told me afterward that catching one clause saved you thousands. He didn't answer, because he couldn't deny it. Without raising my voice, I looked around the room. I've never kept score. Silence. I never wanted to. The silence became heavier. But please, don't tell me I've never contributed. No one responded. Even those who had been whispering only moments earlier suddenly found their desserts very interesting. Rick's smile weakened for the first time that evening. Only slightly. But I noticed. He recovered quickly. This isn't about old favors. He raised his champagne glass. Ladies and gentlemen. The room instinctively looked toward him. I think tonight is the perfect opportunity to close one chapter of this family. He paused dramatically. And begin another. My attention sharpened immediately. Close one chapter. Those weren't the words of someone arguing over a restaurant bill. Those were the words of someone preparing the room for an announcement. Something larger. Something permanent. I watched his face carefully. This dinner had never been about money. The bill. The seating. The humiliation. They were all preparation. He wanted everyone thinking the same thing about me before he revealed whatever came next. That realization changed everything. The check no longer mattered. The real battle hadn't started yet. Slowly, I reached into my handbag. Several relatives leaned forward. Rick watched with obvious satisfaction. He clearly expected to hear the sound of a credit card leaving my wallet. Instead, my fingers closed around a thick, sealed envelope. I placed it gently on the table beside the untouched check. The room fell completely silent. Rick frowned, his eyes fixed on the envelope. For the first time all evening, uncertainty crossed his face. I looked directly at him. My voice remained soft. Rick. I rested one hand on the envelope. Are you absolutely certain? I paused just long enough for every person in the room to look from me to him. That you want everyone here to hear the entire story. Rick didn't answer immediately. He stared at the envelope as though it had appeared out of nowhere. Then he laughed. It wasn't the easy, confident laugh he'd been wearing all evening. It sounded forced. Oh, please, he said, waving a dismissive hand. Don't turn this into one of your office presentations. A few people gave uncertain smiles, but no one laughed with him this time. The mood in the room had shifted. 5 minutes earlier, everyone had been waiting to watch me defend myself. Now they were watching Rick. I gently rested my fingertips on the unopened envelope. I'm not trying to create drama. Rick folded his arms. Then stop acting like there's some great mystery. I nodded. I agree. His eyebrows lifted. The family deserves transparency. He smiled again, relieved that I seemed to be agreeing with him. They absolutely do. Good. He leaned back in his chair. So either pay the bill or tell your little story. I looked around the room. I intend to do the second. Instead of opening the envelope, I asked a question. Does everyone remember when Grandma Alina moved into the assisted living facility? Several heads nodded. My Aunt Linda answered first. Of course. I continued. And about 6 months later, we were all told that her care plan had to change because money had become tight. The room grew thoughtful. Melissa frowned. I remember that. David slowly nodded. Rick said the medical costs had exploded. Another cousin added, didn't we all agree there wasn't enough left in the care fund? That's what we were told, I replied. Rick shifted in his chair. What does any of this have to do with tonight? I met his eyes. I'm getting there. He spoke before I could continue. Grandma's gone. Let her rest. His voice came faster now. Sharper. Less controlled. I noticed Aunt Linda looking at him with quiet confusion. It was the first time all evening she had looked uncertain about her husband's version of events. I turned back to the family. A few weeks ago, I received a phone call. No one interrupted. It came from Grandma's attorney. Several eyebrows rose. I didn't contact him. He contacted me. Rick immediately cut in. That's irrelevant. I ignored him. He asked me to meet him privately because he had discovered accounting inconsistencies while preparing Grandma's final estate documents. The words landed heavily. No one spoke. Even the servers passing through the dining room slowed almost instinctively, sensing something serious was unfolding. Rick leaned forward. What accounting inconsistencies? I looked at him calmly. You already know. His jaw tightened. I have no idea what you're talking about. You will. Rick stood up so suddenly that his chair scraped loudly across the hardwood floor. This is unbelievable. He pointed toward the untouched check. You're trying to distract everyone because you don't want to pay. No. My answer was immediate. I'm explaining why this dinner was arranged. His face reddened. This dinner was arranged because we're celebrating my anniversary. I nodded. Yes. And because you needed every important member of the family in one room before they learned something that would change the way they see you. A murmur rippled through the tables. My cousin Ethan slowly looked from Rick to me. Melissa whispered, "What is she talking about?" Rick's wife turned toward him. Richard. He didn't look at her. His eyes never left mine. I continued speaking evenly. When I met with the attorney, he didn't ask for my help because we're related. I rested one hand on the envelope. He asked because my work involves reviewing financial records and compliance documentation. I could almost hear people putting the pieces together. I spent several evenings helping organize records connected to Grandma's estate. Rick interrupted again. You're making yourself sound important. I'm explaining facts. He took one step toward my table. None of this has anything to do with tonight. I gave a small nod. You're right. Several relatives looked confused. Rick looked almost relieved. Then I finished the sentence. It has everything to do with why you needed tonight to happen before anyone learned the truth. His relief disappeared instantly. The restaurant had become eerily quiet. Conversations from neighboring private rooms seemed miles away. Even the head waiter remained near the entrance, sensing that no one was thinking about dessert or payment anymore. Every pair of eyes had shifted away from me. Toward Rick. For the first time since I'd entered the restaurant, he wasn't controlling the room. He wasn't directing the conversation. He wasn't deciding where people looked. He swallowed. My Aunt Linda spoke softly. Richard. He didn't answer. She tried again. What is she talking about? He still said nothing. I picked up the sealed envelope. Without rushing, I slid it across the white tablecloth until it rested in the center of the banquet table where everyone could see it. The thick stack of documents inside settled with a soft thud. Rick's face lost its color. He took a quick step forward. His voice cracked for the first time all evening. "Don't open that." No one moved. The room had gone so quiet that the faint hum of the restaurant's air conditioning was suddenly noticeable. Rick remained standing, one hand half extended toward the envelope. "Don't open that," he repeated, his voice lower this time. I looked at him for a long moment. "You wanted transparency," I said calmly, "so let's have it." With careful hands, I broke the seal. Several neatly organized documents slid onto the white tablecloth. There were bank statements, certified accounting summaries, letters from the attorney, and copies of financial records bearing official seals. I didn't wave them dramatically. I simply laid them out where everyone could see them. "The attorney gave me certified copies," I said. "Everything here has already been verified." Rick's wife looked from the documents to her husband. "Richard." He didn't answer. I picked up the first page. 3 years ago, Grandma Aliner's long-term care fund contained considerably more money than the family believed. Several relatives exchanged confused looks. I continued. Yet everyone was told the account had nearly run dry because of unexpected medical expenses. Melissa frowned. "I remember that meeting." "So do I," David added. "You told us the doctors kept changing her treatment plan." Rick finally spoke. "Because they did." "Some costs increased," I replied, "but not enough to explain what happened to the account." I placed another document beside the first. The attorney discovered multiple transfers that had nothing to do with Grandma's care. Rick's face tightened. "They were authorized." "They were." I nodded. "They were authorized by the person managing the account." No one needed me to finish the sentence. Every eye slowly turned toward Rick. My Aunt Linda covered her mouth. "What are they talking about?" I handed her one of the certified summaries. She read only the first page before her shoulders sagged. Her eyes filled with tears. "No." She turned another page. Then another. Her hands began trembling. "You told me," she whispered to Rick. "You told me the facility kept raising their prices." Rick didn't respond. He couldn't, because every figure on the page matched the supporting records beside it. The attorney's letter explained the discrepancies clearly. Money intended for Grandma's care had been redirected elsewhere. The investigation had uncovered the irregularities while preparing the estate after Grandma's passing. No accusations, just documented facts. David leaned closer to read. Melissa followed. Within seconds, several relatives were quietly passing the documents around the table. The whispers returned, but they weren't about me anymore. I looked at everyone gathered in the room. When Mr. Harper contacted me, he wasn't looking for someone to accuse anybody. He needed help organizing the records because of the number of financial documents involved. My profession is financial compliance, so I reviewed everything exactly as I would at work. I paused. The records spoke for themselves. I reached for the attorney's letter. Grandma also signed a final amendment to her estate before she passed. Rick closed his eyes. He already knew what was coming. The amendment appoints me as executor. Several people gasped. Not because they doubted the document, because they suddenly understood tonight. I looked directly at Rick. "You learned about that only a few days ago." His silence answered for him. "You knew the family would soon learn I was overseeing the estate." So before that happened, I glanced around the room. "You wanted everyone to believe I was selfish." I rested my hand on the untouched restaurant bill. The seating, The public humiliation. The check. It wasn't about $3,180. It was about destroying my credibility before the truth reached everyone else. No one disagreed. Because the pieces fit together perfectly. Ethan slowly stood. I heard him talking before dinner. The room turned toward him. He told us not to defend Olivia tonight. Rick's head snapped toward his nephew. Ethan continued anyway. He said, Ethan swallowed, that she needed to be put in her place. Melissa lowered her eyes. I thought he was just angry. David shook his head. I never questioned it. My aunt quietly wiped tears from her cheeks. For years, she whispered, I let this happen. She looked at me. I'm so sorry. The words were barely audible. But they were genuine. The restaurant manager approached carefully. I apologize for interrupting. He looked first at me, then at Rick. Our staff has just confirmed that the payment instructions were changed before the event, without authorization from the other hosts. He picked up the leather check presenter. Ms. Bennett, you are not responsible for this bill. He turned respectfully toward Rick. Mr. Bennett, as the event organizer, the balance remains under your reservation. Rick stared at him. The manager gave a courteous nod and stepped away. No speeches. No drama. Just policy. For the first time all evening, the check rested exactly where it belonged. In front of the man who had tried to use it as a weapon. The weeks that followed changed the family far more than one dinner ever could. The attorney completed the estate review, using the documented financial records. Rick's informal control over family decisions disappeared almost overnight. Relatives who had once accepted his version of every story began asking questions instead. Some apologized to me within days. Others waited weeks before finding the courage to call. I listened to every apology, but I only accepted the ones that included accountability instead of excuses. Several relationships quietly faded. That hurt more than I expected. Yet it also brought an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time since my father's death, I stopped measuring my worth by whether I received an invitation or a seat at someone else's table. I started spending holidays with people who wanted my company instead of my usefulness. Months later, another family celebration was planned. An invitation arrived in the mail. I smiled when I opened it. Then I placed it back in the envelope. I sent my congratulations. Nothing more. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I no longer needed approval from people who had confused silence with weakness. That night at the restaurant taught me something I should have learned years earlier. Anyone can save you a chair when they need something from you. Real family never makes you earn your place at the table. And the most expensive thing paid that evening was never the *3, 180 ** dinner. It was the price Uncle Rick paid when the truth finally cost him the respect he'd spent years pretending to deserve.